Hello everyone, this is Express Collector, and welcome back to part 2 of my Top 20 Thomas episodes. I think I hear the conductor's whistle, so let's get right on into the list. Number 10. Bulgy. This episode, to me, is one of my favorites of the time I rejoined the fandom. I remember this episode was one of the first ones I watched when I was slowly getting back into Thomas in 2020. And I watched it repeatedly because it was very memorable. The characters are really well interacted, the music is great, and I like that Bulgy is a one-off character in this episode, that he comes off the way he does, because he does really seem like something to be taken seriously. And I think that having Oliver and Duck be the ones who confront him on this is great. I like that we finally get, some little Western stories that aren't solely focused on one character. Not saying those are bad, because those are great as well, but I really like the way this episode goes about its very sort of serious tone in a very serious yet lighthearted way. And I think the ending is just iconic. We all remember the ending of Bulgy getting stuck under the bridge, and so this was his shortcut. But yeah, very iconic, very memorable episode. Not really much else I can say. So Bulgy is number 10 on my list. Number 9. Thomas and the Special Letter. I don't really hear a lot about this episode when it comes to people saying whether they like it or not, but for me, this episode was one I had mixed opinions on as a kid. For one, I liked the idea that they're all going to travel to London or wherever it is they were going, but I didn't like seeing Thomas crash when I was a little kid. Now, having grown up, having gone over the episode repeatedly, it's one of my favorites now. I like that they're all, going to London, and Sir Topham Hatt using Duck as a platform has kind of become a meme, which is kind of funny. I like how Thomas is so prideful, and then immediately he's like, oh yeah, I can just casually stop right here, and then it's like, nope.
I had a race with Bertie once. I whooshed through the tunnel and stopped an inch from the buffers. Then, Thomas made his mistake. Just like this, he boasted.
And he proceeds to, that kind of thing. And other than that, good characters, good music, all the good things. And the season 4 visuals really pay off here. I like that we see all the cast of characters thus far, except for Diesel, in this episode, and I think that's great. It's very memorable, and that's something that we always cherish. And I know there's people out there who want that image as like a big poster, and I'm no exception to that. So overall, not much more I can say about this one that I haven't said already. So I really like this one, and it's number 9 on my list. Number 8. I know a lot of people might get frustrated at me because this one isn't in my top 3. Escape. This episode is probably everyone's favorite, or it's in everyone's top 3. But how could it not be? The visuals are so iconic. The story is so memorable. It's so heroic. It's the Great Escape, and it's Indiana Jones, and it's all these amazing things. All this sort of hero story, but in Thomas, and it's done so well. The fact that it's Douglas who goes and rescues Oliver is poetic, because Douglas was going to be scrapped if he stayed in Scotland, and now he's helping another engine escape the same fate, which is great. It's amazing. Great writing. And the scenes over at the scrapyard, they are pretty good. I like the fact that they had this whole little plan, and the fact that they're able to get away with all of this is great, the way they did with that. But they're all for us, and then, they have to examine him, and it's all this sort of tension, and they're like, alright, you can go. And as soon as you hear that, and you hear that heroic theme blaring in the background, oh my gosh, that is what made Classic Thomas so great.
We've had worse, smiled Oliver, and they forged ahead. It was daylight when their journey ended.
It felt like you're watching a movie compressed into 4 minutes and 30 seconds an episode, and this episode really feels like an adventure film. It's shot like one, it's scored like one, and it looks like one. So, what more could you ask for, you know? And because of this, Escape is number 8 on my list. Number 7. A Better View for Gordon. This episode is probably my favorite out of season 5 because the characters just work so well here. Gordon is still being a pompous, person, a pompous engine, very cocky. And he gets his comeuppance. These episodes are great because of the way they progress. And this one is no exception. The beginning begins with, a casual roast of Percy, but other than that, it's very memorable that he gets his comeuppance not once, but twice. And, hold on. Wait. Do you hear that? I got you. But, yeah, that scene right there is so memorable, Everyone remembers it. It's used in all sorts of videos. I've used it in more than one of my videos, and so memorable. And there's not really much else I can say about it. Character interactions are great. The music is good. The station joke scene is probably one of the most iconic in Thomas. So I'm gonna keep this one short because I have to go to the grand opening of the new station, and hopefully this time it goes well. Number 6. The Flying Kipper. Another one that should be in, that everyone says it has to be in your top 10 somewhere. Well, here it is for me. For me, what makes this episode great is the visuals and the music. I love the visuals in this episode. I know I had said that Fish had some of the best night scenes, but as I watched this episode again in preparation for this video, it's a tie for me, because Fish does the night scenes in absolute darkness. This is a sunrise that we're getting, and it is probably one of the only times we get this sort of weather, and it's so good looking, and even the snow adds another sense of world, another sense of ambiance, another sense of really memorable background. It's great. It's wonderful. I love the visuals in this episode. And, sometimes this is one of those you want to watch in winter, if you ask me. I want to watch it in winter. I want to sit down with a nice hot cup of cocoa, and then, casually run out of the brake van as a giant train plows into it.
Henry's drive.
Yeah. No, maybe not that last part, but you know what I mean. This is one of those episodes that you have to watch whenever you're rewatching, season 1, or whenever you're watching Thomas episodes casually. You have to watch this episode because it is just that good. The music, oh my gosh, that Flying Kipper theme that we only ever get in this episode is so memorable, so good, so extremely well done. Mike and Junior always killed it with the music. It was so good throughout the whole time. They're actually, their music is big inspiration on my music for my series, so happy to see wonderful music like this in episodes such as this. And, not really much else I can say, because there's so much that's already been said. It's just that good. Number 5. Donald's Duck. This is one that really grew on me when I came back into the fandom, probably the most of any episode. This episode I never saw as a kid. I did not see it until I came back into the fandom. Which is strange, because I remember binge watching Thomas episodes on YouTube as a little kid like crazy. But this is one I never actually saw until I came back. And this episode for me is a combination of two things, it feels like. It feels like, world building, and then something really well done between Duck and Donald. I love how in this episode we actually kind of get to distinguish the Scottish twins, because in Escape, I didn't mention this when I brought up that episode, but Douglas is very brave in going out and rescuing Oliver. Here we get to see that Donald is very lighthearted. He has a crack out of, giving Duck a little bit of some gentle ribbing, per se. I think that the jokes in this episode are done really well. The whole little prank war between Duck and Donald is, to me, is very memorable because it's very relatable and it's very casually, oh, you might have laid it in your sleep. Oh, it's like, the way they play it off is great. It's so relatable. It's so well written. So memorable. So there's not really much I can say about that. The visuals and the music in this episode, though, I do want to bring that up because the whole first half of the episode, all the shots of the little western are fabulous. They are so well done. The little rock arch, kind of rock tunnel sort of thing, I like that. The building of the station is well done as well. So not really much more I can say. This one is good visuals, good music, good characters. What's not to like? Number 4. Percys Promise. This one mostly has to do with two things that I probably mentioned for a lot of these episodes. The visuals and the music. One of the great things I think about Season 3 is that some of the episodes that are meant to be more thrilling and suspenseful, like this and Escape, they feel like they're shot as though they were movies and not, individual episodes. They feel like short films, and that is something I definitely see in Percy's Promise. The stark contrast between daylight at the beginning, gloomy skies, and then, full-on rainstorm. That contrast is really good. The score for this one is really good as well, with that danger theme playing as he's going by. I know I did an arrangement of that, which it's nowhere near how good the original is. The original is so good. No forgetting that. No doubting that. And I really like Percy's role, even though, he kind of casually mentions this episode in Season 2. It's not really played out until Season 3, and I'm glad it was held out until Season 3, because it just looks so much better in Season 3 style than it probably would have in Season 2. Not saying Season 2 is bad visuals, but I think the visual style just works really well with Season 3. And I have no idea how they did those floods, how they did all the filming for this, but I have to give them a standing ovation for it because it is so well filmed. I have no idea if the model was even able to run underwater or not, but the fact that they went through all that trouble to make the story seem as real as possible, major kudos from me. And not much more I can really say. I'm still in astonishment at how good the filmmaking is for this episode. So I'm going to leave it at that. Number 3. I know I'm going to get skewered for this one, but my number 3 favorite episode is Rusty to the Rescue. Now, I know a lot of fans like to, for lack of a better term, not talk good about this episode, because I will admit the story just seems a little clunky, and there are a few plot holes, like how did they get a whole narrow gauge railway all the way to the other railway, and I think that Unlucky Tug did a really good job in explaining it in his latest model series timeline video with an old line that went from Crowvin's Gate all the way to Victorstown. I think that was a good explanation for it, and I'm tempted to use that. I'm going to use that as justification for what happens in this episode. But I like that, we're introduced to this beautiful countryside of the Bluebell Railway, and then, oh, we need an engine. So Rusty proceeds to go ask the one engine who's rescued an engine, Douglas, and I like that. They kind of bring in modern events into the situation, well, modern for the time, there's only diesels that go there. So I like that. That little detail was very nice. And then Rusty's journey, the little, I don't know, what is it, a cornet or a trumpet that's used for that little riff as he's traveling through the daylight, and then how we get to a sort of more flute and piccolo sort of line when he starts traveling through at night. The contrast is done so well, and the scenes at the scrapyard are so suspenseful. I had mentioned how Escape had some good scrapyard scenes, but I much prefer the ones in Rusty to the Rescue in terms of dialogue and in terms of ambience. I know you're going to say, oh, but it's just a redress set. Well, they did the best they could with that redress set, and I like both narrations, how they had the engine be, who are you, and all that. I like that. I think that both narrators, both George and Michael, did a wonderful job with the sort of dark, foreboding sort of ambience, sort of feel for that scene. And then we get to rescuing Stepney. And I know I haven't talked a lot about Stepney, but you all know I like Stepney. He's one of my favorite characters, as I brought up in my 50 subscriber Q&A. Gosh, that was so long ago. And the escape from the railway, I think, is great. Really well scored, really well filmed. That night shot of them going across the bridge with a full moon in the background, it's so good. It's my computer wallpaper. So, not really much more I can say about this one. It's just the right formula for me. I really like it, even though a lot of people don't like it. I really like this one. So that's why it's number 3. Number 2. All at Sea. Now this is an episode that definitely grew on me since I was a kid. I saw this one twice as a kid. I remember that. I never had any of the DVDs it was on, so I saw it on YouTube. I didn't really care much for it as a kid. But now that I've grown up, and this one really grew on me after the great Michelangelo's passed away. Because this was one of those that I saw after I found out he passed away. And his narration in this episode, his last line is just... It's one of those lines that really goes into the depths of your soul, and you really hear it and you feel it. And it's one of those that I think applies not only in the Thomas world, but you could, use something similar to it in real life, and that's one of the things I like about it. This episode is basically saying, like, it's good to yearn for more, it's good to want, it's good to have dreams, but at the same time, it's good to live the life that you have, and that's one of those that, it really, it's a very emotional episode now for me. It used to be very simple, the premise, Duck is observing the regatta, he's amazed by it, he wants to sail to faraway lands, and, he eventually learns that, as fun as that would be, it's great to be an engine, it's great to, be himself, and I think that nowadays, that little lesson is very relevant, and that one, to this day, whenever I watch it, I get a little emotional because of the message, and Michelangelo's last line in that episode just, it's very memorable, and there's not really much more I can say. I'll just let him finish this one.
Duck still wonders about the lands beyond the horizon, but he enjoys being with friends most of all, and I think he knows that sometimes the best travels are those we can only dream about. Don't you?
Now, I'm going to give some honorable mentions before we get to my number 1, because most of you probably know what my number 1 episode is, but I'm just going to pretend that we don't know it. So, time for some honorable mentions. Birdie's Chase. Simple episode. I just really like the way it was done. I like that, the sort of, it's kind of like the Thomas and Birdie's Great Race kind of thing, but without the racing element. And I like that. He's scrambling to get this done. It's like you're scrambling to catch the bus or something. I think that's a very nice little episode. Thomas Saves the Day from Season 8. I think this was one of the first episodes I ever saw as a kid, which is probably why it's stuck with me for so long. And I did recently do a collaborative remake of it. Link in the description. Daisy. This episode is just, there's not really anything that goes on. We meet Daisy, and she has to take a train, but she doesn't want to take the milk train. And I think that the character dynamics really make this one great. Best Dressed Engine. Another childhood favorite of mine. I really liked this one as a kid, and I thought it was a fun little watch, and I still think so to this day. Gordon, Thomas and the Jet Engine. Just comedy. It's just fun. It's that sort of light-hearted episode that, seems unrealistic, but it's so enjoyable. Number 1. Gordon Takes a Tumble. You all knew this was coming. I think I mentioned it in my previous Q&A, but this episode is just my favorite because it's one of those that I've loved as a kid, and I still love it now. I think this is probably the first, or one of the first ones I remember watching, and it was so memorable, I just couldn't stop thinking, this is, I always liked it, and I like to, kind of recreate the scene with my Tommy Gordon, playing indoors, I'd have him fall off a bridge and just roll him around on the carpet, and that was fun. Unfortunately, that Tommy Gordon doesn't run anymore, but we don't talk about that. The episode, I think, is another great instance of, don't get ahead of yourself. You're never too good to do something that you don't want to. We all have to do these things we don't like, but just take it in stride. Don't make a fuss about it. It's Gordon's character perfectly portrayed. This is one of those where we see the microcosm of his character, well, or at least his bad side of his character. Because, we all know he has a good side, but the bad side of his character, the sort of snooty, kind of cocky, kind of like, kind of very, well-composed and dignified character, going through probably what is the most humiliating thing that's happened to him in the series, which, I think is, this episode as a whole is really well done, and how could anyone not forget the whole go slow thing? He's like, oh, I don't go slow, and then, we end up with, this. It's classic, it's unforgettable, it's great, and, yeah, not much more I have to say about this one that, haven't said previously, This is my favorite episode of Thomas and Friends. And there it is, after roughly, 30 minutes of me rambling, hours upon hours of editing, After all of this, my top 20 episodes of Thomas and Friends. Let me know what you thought about my list in the comments down below, and feel free to comment down below your opinions on my choices, or what your top 20s are. I would not mind having conversations about that in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching. This video took a lot of effort, and I'm glad to see that it's getting views. And I'll see you all in my next video.